last of the Register series before the break at Christmas. This is the 58th in the invited series of Register Talks, and we're excited about this one because it's slightly different to the others in the sense that we're making a space for a conversation with an architect who has quietly initially over the decades innovated in material use in the making of their architecture. And there's a kind of a received wisdom, which is that architecture or architectural practice doesn't have the space for this kind of innovation anymore, given the insurance and other regulatory environments that surround the discipline. And in the context of the school theme, which, as you all know, is architecture and its languages, we're connecting here with Gilles Perraudin, who has worked out how to build in a particular way using mass stone construction, initially for very practical reasons, but then increasingly finding that it has utility in other areas. So initially in agricultural buildings or kind of buildings linked to vineyards and that kind of thing, but now making social housing projects and other using this technique. And I believe, Gilles, you are in conversation with people in London, Amin Taha and others who are seeking to emulate some of your innovations in a London context. And I think the reason that they are focusing attention on Gilles is a couple of reasons. The first is that we are aware in the light of the climate crisis that architecture can renew itself using the cultural knowledge of the discipline in an expanded field. And I guess what I'm saying is in many senses, the climate crisis requires a reinvention of language and the engagement with how we make our buildings as profound as any that we might have experienced before. We need only think of the Enlightenment or Chicago in the late 19th century, etc., that there are moments when technological advances and where societal pressures impede in architecture and make a transformative impact, which the discipline either navigates by finding its way through that or fails to so do. In this case, it's an existential threat, so we better find our way through it. And I think in this context, then it's useful to kind of talk about how one might innovate by engaging with timeless concerns, which is where Gilles is, and using stone and other techniques, producing a language of architecture which is rooted in history, but also offers some profound benefits. And so without further waffle from myself, I'm sort of letting the room fill up a little bit. I'm going to hand over to you, Gilles. Bienvenue à Kingston. And we're very much looking forward to hearing your lecture.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Can I begin?
Please, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening for every students. I don't know where you are because I have just the image of Andrew. And dear Andrew, and thank you for invitation. I am very happy to be with you, even if I am far away, not so far, but in France, in the town of Lyon. I'm sorry, but because my English is very bad, and it's why I use a translation for my lecture. Okay. I am going to show you some projects built over my last 25 years, where I went from architecture of high-tech fragrances to a radically breaking approach through the use of natural materials, and in particular stone, as we said to you. The title of my lecture is called The Saving Stone, and I hope you will understand why at the end of my presentation. 25 years. In the 1995, I started the construction for an important building in the Ruhr area of Germany in the town of Ermesedingen. Coming from the first 15 years of my professional practice, it testifies the culmination of research devoted to imagining architectures that respect the environment and best preserve our living conditions on Earth. Built in wood from the nearby forest and covered by photovoltaic cells, that produce not only its own electricity, but also for the new built neighborhood. It has become a possible model of a response to the environmental challenges for the future. Its double envelope constitutes the development of an architectural concept imagined from the start of my career, concept that I call the macroclimatic envelope, which consists of protecting the main spaces with a second envelope which protects them from climatic variations. Doubly protected, studies have shown a significant reduction in energy consumption and also provide generous convivial spaces. This building of the Académie de Montcenis, as I said, is not only fully self-sufficient, but it is also a producer of energy that benefits the new districts built around it. However, I was not completely satisfied with the solution. Recent studies began to point the energy balances of construction materials and techniques as an important element of the overall energy balance, what is called today embodied energy. It is a concept that has tremendous importance in how we approach architectural design. Recent studies have shown that the lower the embodied energy is, that is the carbon footprint during construction, the more efficient the carbon footprint after more than half a century of use will be. This amounts to saying that our efforts must focus primarily on construction materials and techniques, favoring materials with a low carbon footprint and construction techniques without heavy mechanical solutions. In short, to build as our ancestors did with the materials they had on hand, and by assembling them by techniques using only hydro, wind, animals, or human energy. But I only learned about these studies later after the Montcenis Academy project in Germany. I had the intuition that the energy expenditure generated by the manufacture of photovoltaic cells did not, in the long term, equal the energy gain from their operation, and that this problem called into question the high-tech solution that I had partially used until then. The opportunity to change my constructive paradigm was given to me during the construction of a very modest building. It's not the modest building, a very modest building in the 19th, the Vauvert winery. Owner of a few acres of wines in the south of France near the Camargue, I decided to build a building in stone and solid wood. This experience gave me the chance to also change architectural paradigm. This is what I would like to tell you in the rest of my lecture. I came across stone by chance while bathing in the waters of the garden, the river Garden, which passed under the piles of the famous Roman aqueduct, le Pont du Gard. I discovered that the stone quarries were active and were still mining blocks of stone. Falling into disuse, stone was only used to make decorative elements, fireplaces, barbecue, balusters, and so on. I quickly perceived the qualities of this material, which was suitable for my wine-making cellar. In particular, the strong thermal inertia favorable to the conservation of the wine. Ignoring everything about stone construction, I have worked for several years to define a process which satisfies me both architecturally and economically. This experience was the founder of a renewal of my architectural approach. She was a dazzle. I had discovered the vein that was missing from my interrogations then. Built with my own hands, it's me on the picture, as you see, I discovered the immense potential of these materials belonging to a common heritage of a large part of the planet. The assembly of stone modules, of 2 meters, 1 by 1 meters by half meters, all identical and able to take over only 2 positions, one vertical and one in another horizontal, excluding cantilevers, put me on the path of an architectural response of great sobriety. I then discovered a French literary movement called the Oulipo. This literary movement imposes very strict written rules, such as those used, for example, for poems or Japanese haiku. We impose rules, free the creator from his own psyche. Since the architectural form is imposed on me, I no longer have the anxiety to having to invent forms. This set me on the path of a discovery of fundamental qualities of architecture, which are rhythm, proportion, light, materials. Luckily, immediately after this crucial experience, I was commissioned to build a teaching college on the outskirts of Nîmes, a city founded by Roman and close to the Pont du Gard quarries. Inspired by the construction of my winery, the project is a series of massive stone buildings with 50 centimeters thick, single level walls, set in the middle of an annulled olive grove. The roof has a single span, with a vaulted roof to promote the effect of air stratification in a Dutch country. These constructions are arranged to break the north wind, the Mistral, and create courtyards and passages in the shade. This building is inspired by the Roman camps with Cardo de Cumanus, as much as a Chartreuse, which is a series of customary buildings assembled in a demarcated enclosure. It was the opportunity to supplement my experience and my analysis on the interests and advantages of stone construction. First of all, it's a speed. I always like to remember that this construction was ahead of the construction schedules for the first and the last time in my career. The assembly of stones, which can easily resemble prefabricated concrete blocks, is very quick. It is all the more so as the stone once laid gives an aspect of great beauty and avoid the additional cost of a coating on its surface. These coatings, which with limited constructive qualities, often lead architects to a purely aesthetic expression of their work. Numerous contemporary examples bear witness to this outrageous aestheticization of architecture. I believe that this aestheticization challenging architects to invent every day a more spectacular work than the day before. This has made architects simple producers of images to the detriment of their role as builders. In doing so, they let companies and engineers seize power in the act of building by reducing architects to a simple role of image maker. Then, excited by these immense possibilities and on the occasion of a new project running competition, the college for 1,100 students, I propose the construction of an ambition building entirely in massive stone. The building, aligned along a new track, is a quadrangle 200 meters long and 60 meters wide. The various elements of the programs are arranged by their use under a single roof pierced with openings defining the free spaces of the interior courtyard. Facing the plane that is dominates, the long facade defines a simple rhythm with harmonized with the large openings of the roof. This project is a variation of the concept of a microclimatic envelope but adapted to the southern Europe. The roof creates shade by controlling the sun and protecting intermediate spaces from the wind. But it was a disaster. While we had completed all the studies and the construction was ready to start, the client, under pressure from local politicians and traditional concrete companies, worked to prevent the realization. It is not easy to clash head-on with existing economic system. If there is room for some marginal operations, the system will do everything to prevent a challenge for its hegemony. So far, no operation of this magnitude have seen the light of day. This hegemony is expressed in different ways, in particular at the level of the building standards and regulations. These rules discriminate against constructions that offer solutions based on natural materials, also in terms of seismic rules or on fire. I remember we discussed it with Aminta in London recently. It is the industrial firms that finance the regulations. The stone industry is poor. It is not able to lay down construction rules following research processes imposed by the firms themselves. Thus, the stone, has for it the advantage of a few millennia of construction, have no standard adapted to the contemporary world of construction. We will see in a recent project that we have succeeded in countering these standards from the decades, and we have been fighting for the perverse effects they have on stone construction. This project was a massive blow with disastrous consequences of my professional future. That's why I was happy to welcome a small wine saver project. The client wanted to build a massive stone part to hide a large metal shed. We convinced him to do the whole things in stone. That's what we did, with the same budget as a metal shed and with an infinitely more quality. With 65 centimeter thick walls and a planted roof, thermal inertia is ideal. It's a cellar and it's ideal for the wine, sorry. You have to understand what is the construction process, which is very economical. The quarryman extracts stone blocks adapted to the tools they have. These blocks are simply cut in half by large saws, then they are mounted quickly by traditional lifting devices. Simply laid with a lime mortar joint to ensure air and water tightness, the construction is a simple operation. No steel or concrete reinforcement. As expressed before, the construction imposes a sober writing. A wine cellar is like a chapel, especially in France, with a central nave and side aisles. as you can see in the picture. The light's proportions result from the frugality of the construction. The consequences of the use of stone on my architectural style will become more and more significant. The construction of a new wine cellar would provide me the opportunity. The circumstances of this project would allow us to reach an increasingly mystical dimension of architectural approach. A religious community of Orthodox nuns living in the south of France from vineyards came to see me for the construction of their new winery adjoining the renovated farm in which they lived. Followers of agroecology and guided by Pierre Rabhi, which is a famous French peasant philosopher, they embodied a radical attitude for societal future of a world altered by unbridled consumerism. With few resources, we decided to build in self-construction. I must tell you my admiration for traditional vernacular architecture. These architectures are for me the example of the splendor of architecture subject to strict rules of economy of means. Men built for their bare need without speculating on the market value of their property. Without preparation and without makeup, this frugal construction of great sobriety of expression are sensual splendors. I ended up concluding that beauty can only be born under the most extreme economic conditions. The building, this I show you now, this building is a double square in plan. Didn't Louis Kahn start all his project by drawing a square? Exterior walls are not really walls. This is a series of columns at a systematic 1A to A rhythm in 1 meter deep. They function like a curtain drawn over monastic life, filtering the light with moves horizontally each day to count the unfolding of the days. It leads the gaze from below upwards, from the conditions of our earthly misery to the infinity of divine mercy. French architect Auguste Perret said that beautiful architecture always results in beautiful ruins. The construction led by a team of Romanian Orthodox carpenter gives me the opportunity to experience it, but starting with the rules. Suddenly, it don't bother me not to be modern, said the French philosopher Roland Barthes. For 10 years now, I have been seeking through my work to find the lost thread of architecture, the history of which ceaselessly modernity had broken. Isolated and lost in the search for an identity, men believe that only progress will give meaning to their lives. But like Ruskin or Tessino, suspicious of technological progress and ardent defenders of artisanal work, which links math to the materially used, I conceive an incredibly distrust of this modernity in the service of the most materialistic instinct of humanity in abeyance. The village of Patrimonio is located in Corsica, a large Mediterranean island. Its wine is famous. This museum project is intended to become a gathering place for wine growers and a welcoming place for visitors. I imagine it as a hamlet bringing together the different functions of the museum around outdoor spaces open to activities and the public. Each module is square and has a function. I learned the lesson, recap. Each square is divided on 3 parts. I have brought together in a book, Building in Massive Stone Today, all the operations involved in the construction of the Patrimonial Wine Museum. I think that you can find it on a good library. It's Building in Massive Stone Today. The walls are 60 centimeters thick. The roof is in the wood, Corsican, we call it Laricio pine, it's a Corsican pine, insulated with wool, and covered with earth. The joinery is made of chestnut trees, endemic to the island. No thermal insulation on the wall to preserve the advantage of the high inertia of the stone. The outdoor spaces equipped with vegetated pergolas and ponds produce a protective microclimate. These are the traditional devices of Mediterranean architecture. We have we have the feeling of walking in a place that seemed to come from 1,000 years or 2,000 years old, past, but yet very contemporary. A place, however, indifferent to modernity. Stone is already made in the billions of years of the creation of the planets. Extracted simply by sawing, they are then cut, transported by trucks, numbered according to a precise layout. The stones are mounted quickly with a small mobile construction machine. In the end, the stone has an extremely low carbon footprint, in the order of 4 kilos per ton. All the start of the studies, we had to build the earthen buildings. There are some earthen constructions which are built in Corsica. They were inspired by Hassan Fatih, who came to give a seminar in Corsica at the request of some fanatics of his work. We must pay homage here to the great Egyptian master because he illustrates the courage and conviction of an architect who know how to fight modernity, to reconnect with the millennium and reconnect people with their identity. The steamroller of modernity remains invincible, but for how much longer? To be happy, we have to be in harmony with the places where we live. Modernity is constantly inventing spectacular places which are publicized and are made to be consumed but not to be experienced. Accommodation of a world detached individual from their cultural roots. Men, in the true sense of the term, no longer know where they live, but building in stone, these materials from our identity base, we reconnect the broken thread of our modern history and put people back in a place where they can live in order to be happy. This project of this house is in a very dense urban context, will give us the opportunity to prove that stone is a material adapt to the most complex conditions. The small plots we had is completely enclosed in the middle of all buildings in the historic district of Lyon. The project makes the most of the regulatory possibilities for construction. Heights, widths are strictly regulated. A single openings give us access to the construction site. To overcome the shallow construction depth, the serving spaces, bathroom, laundry room, pantry, and so on, are perpendicular to the facades. In the void resulting for their position are the living spaces. Yes, you can see in the picture, this is the supports which contain the serving spaces. The serving blocks become the supports to the floor and the roof. We enter them, cross them, and the house becomes a walk in a stone landscape. A skillful and complex assemblage of stone. Yes, a feeling of being in a medieval construction. It is a tribute to Louis Kahn, who was inspired by medieval construction in his work. The work required to define each stone is long but exciting. You can see it in this example. This is this picture. But this work has another virtue, that of redefining the relationship between architecture and engineering. Often architects leave it to engineers to define the construction of their work, which ends up escaping them. Faced with this disposition, the architects take refuge in a purely plastic work which distorts their art. No need for an engineer to define the structure. The simple laws of stability are sufficient to guarantee the work. The architect once again becomes the master of his work. The art of architecture is the most difficult of arts. It is located on the borders of sculpture, painting, music, and subject to the laws of construction. But the art cannot be confused with any of the other artistic disciplines. It is a demanding discipline to be able to combine the satisfaction of basic needs in an artistic response. Few are those who succeed, and we can see how the architecture of the 20th century, depriving architects of the technical mastery of their discipline, locked themselves in a plastic or sculptural approach that will suffocate them. The stone can help save us. But if stone can perfectly become a constructive model for singular individual houses, can it be adapted to the construction of social housing with limited construction cost? The answer is yes. The opportunity was given to me during a competition for the construction of a new district on the outskirts of the city of Toulouse in southwestern France. The district is made up of more than 100 individual dwellings, grouped or isolated, and collective dwellings for rent and purchase. All walls are 30 centimeters thick stone with no concrete or steel reinforcement. The joinery is made of larch, a wood that doesn't not need chemical protective treatment. With the stone, which have no chemical treatment, the housing is very easily. The accommodations are systematically crossing between north and south. To the south, a large terrace extends the interior space. Wooden shutters transform it in a protective space on winter days and on summer days and winter nights. Stone provides a great deal of inertia, which cools homes in summer and retains it in winter. The building is very compact, for a minimum of walls in contact with the outside. The regulations require us to install insulation. Congratulations to the insulation manufacturer's lobby. The construction required more than 1,000 cube meters of stone, yes. Only a few quarries in France are capable to meeting this challenge. The development of stone projects which will allow the development of quarries to meet new demand. Let's not forget that after World War II, the reconstruction of France was done in stone, illustrated by the gigantic operation of the architects Fernand Pouillon in Marseille, Paris, and Algiers. Some environmentalists worry about the development of quarries which deplete resources. They may be reassured. Each construction is a new quarry. There are many historical examples of buildings that were dismantled and then reused. The stone cladding of the pyramids of Gizeh was used to build the palaces of Cairo. The dismantling of the Bastille during the French Revolution is reflected in the buildings of the district. And the architect, Perraudin, reused Roman Florence column for the construction of St. Peter's Square. Stone is not recyclable, it is reused. Recycling requires spending new energy. For example, aluminium requires as much energy for recycling as it does for manufacturing. For this reason, recycling should be banned, which is the good conscience of the industry. The stone is indefinitely reusable because no energy is required for its reuse. You can change small pieces of degraded stone, which is impossible with reinforced concrete because the built skeleton is integral from the top to the bottom of the building. Thanks to the large size of the elements, the assembly time is very fast and therefore very economical. We have adapted this size to contemporary lifting devices. We still have to make progress to find lifting means powered by renewable energies. I would like to point out to you the construction of a contemporary building that does not use any fossil fuel, never for materials, nor for lifting equipment. It is an experiment carried out, I have no picture, I'm sorry, that it was an experiment carried out by archaeologists who decided to remake the castle of Gilles in Burgundy, in France, in the style of construction of the time. This experience proves that we can build today without spending carbon. This whole operation does not go beyond the 3 levels. Would it be as limit in height up to the stone construction I was told? The following project will show us that we can make high-rise buildings in stone. The first, unfortunately not built demonstration is that of a tower presented during a competition in the city of Genova, made up of a superposition of shops, offices, and housing of 20 levels. The building is entirely in stone, a granite called gneiss, and climbs 65 meters in height. The inner bracing core is also stone. Faced with the doubt that a listener of my conference expressed on the possibility that such a building could be built in Paris, I pointed out to him the already proven presence of 2 towers 60 65 meters high, without the Notre-Dame de Paris. The two towers, Notre-Dame de Paris, are 65 meters high. And I am sure London has monuments of this height. One day, traveling in the south of England, with Rice, he pointed out to me that it would be difficult to justify the stability of the church we were visiting for the lack of a suitable mathematical model. It was Peter who first put the idea of stone in my head and made it possible. He knew that the absence of rules would be a barrier to the use of stone. We need to motivate young engineers to rediscover these splendid materials. But before showing you two projects of buildings of modest heights, I would like to bring up a subject that is close to my heart, but the thermal insulation, and I will do it with a modest little house. It is a small single-family house built in the south of France, in the Rhone Valley. It is located in a residential area and on a small floodplain almost 1 story high. To find the best ratio between volume and living space, the house is on a square basis, always the Canyon square. Obeying strict geometric rules, division into 9 equal parts, the living spaces are distributed in an optimized manner. With a large terrace to the south, in front of a large bay, capturing the generous winter sun and protected in summer by a vegetated pergola, the living rooms crosses the house to benefit from a bay to the north of full ventilation. 2 bedroom and services area occupy the east and west faces. The rooms are fitted with stone screen, which allow ventilation protection from the sun and intrusion. This is a kind of drawings we did where to manage the construction on site. Each stone is defined, and it's in the site. It's only an assembly. Our architectural work focuses on eliminating all unnecessary formalism. It focuses only on the subjects of light, as I said before, proportion, rhythm, and matter. Matter, what do you want to be? The stone answers, I want to be a wall. These walls are 40 centimeters thick and have no insulation. The design of a house allows for this regulatory deviation. The rooms are not heated. The large north and south windows have double glazing, and the east and west walls are protected by the services areas. The insulation surface is very small. Only the roof and floors are insulated. In the context of global warming, summer comfort is more important than winter comfort. This picture of this very small house in a very low budget, made entirely in stone and wood. Thermal inertia must be privileged, and stone meets this objective perfectly. I will end my presentation with 2 projects under construction. The first is in Lyon. The second is in Geneva, in Switzerland. Located on the banks of the Rhone in Lyon, opposite the large urban park of the Tête d'Or, the program called for the superimposition of functions, a return to principles of the city before the new towns which separate these functions in space. A workshop on the ground floor, carpentry fab lab, on the first level of the offices, and finally 3 levels of accommodation, 2 of which are duplex on the roof. It is a modest project, but one that focuses a lot of response on the future of cities. If we want to reduce our carbon footprint, it is imperative to reduce urban travel by bringing the distance between home and the worker place closer together. A few years ago, I worked on a city project built in stone and including this reflection on urban diversity, as well as on the hyper-density to reduce the impact of the urban sprawl. In a few centuries, if we are still alive, the endless lines of cars going from places of residence to places of work will make people laugh. They are so ridiculous. This is some picture of the montage of the stone for this project. As you can see, each stone is cut in precious dimensions, and then they are put with a sample glue mortar to glue as you can see, there is nothing to mechanical system to maintain the stone between them. The facade responds to a rhythm guided by the maximum crossing with a single stone, which is 2.5 meters. The need to cross large spaces on the ground floor and impose the most classic form of crossing on Earth. Are amazed at how fast and efficient it is. If that includes ore extraction, transportation, blast furnace processing, rolling, cutting, welding, and transportation, one will be astounded by the extremely short making time of a stone arch. And what about carbon footprint? Our Lyon office served as a model for this. Lyon is built on hills, and one of them, the Croix-Rousse, was covered in the 19th century with workshops to house the silk weavers, who were one of the city's great specialty. These workshops are superimposed in high-rise buildings, sometimes up to 35 meters high, constructed soberly. They are all of the same model. A load-bearing frame in massive stone every 2 meters, as I said, a service by an open exterior passageway crossing between the streets and the interior courtyard. Summer is hot in Lyon, and ventilation from the green interior courtyards is essential. The inertia of stone, like that of wooden floor loaded with sand, is essential. Certainly, we must transport the stone. With the disappearance of the railways, the road took over. Why? One of the reasons is that the time between production and consumption should be as short as possible for better performance on financial flows. The road allows it. But this law of the productivist system is only valid for if the produced transports have high added value. That is to say, industrial products. But stone is a natural product with low added value. It could be transported by river or rail. These transports are less and less developed and condemn us to use the road. Faced with a housing shortage, this is the last project I did, which is under construction now in Geneva, in Switzerland. Faced with a housing shortage, the canton of Geneva has, for several years, initiated an ambitious housing construction policy. This project takes place in a complex of around 700 housing units in the town of Blanc-les-Ouates on the outskirts of Geneva. Awarded after an architectural competition, our proposal concerned 4 buildings grouped in pairs of 5 to 8 levels. A square plan is imposed for each building. No need to invoke Louis Kahn. The Swiss are rigorous people, and the formal sobriety of their construction satisfies us. On this square base, we project 3 nested rows. In the center, the vertical distribution. Then a second ring delimiting the service areas. And finally, the last crown of the living spaces, kitchen, living room, bedrooms. Between each crown of massive stone walls, each wall meets different requirements. 2 are interior, and the third constitutes the facade. The interior wall is the less used. It is made of a thinner stone and does not require frost resistance. The double load intermediate wall, as you can see in these drawings, you can see the 1,000 blocks we need to build these 2 buildings. The double load intermediate wall is made of a more stress-resistant stone with an average thickness of 40 centimeters. The walls of the first 2 levels which support the 8 levels are thicker, 50 centimeters. The front wall, which is not the most heavily loaded, must meet the criteria of resistance to frost, and in the lower parts to the possible degradation of shock and aggression from the splashing of rain. Cornices prevent water from flowing and staining the walls due to urban pollution. The massive load-bearing stone construction without structural reinforcement changed the division of labor between architects and engineers. The architect once again becomes the master of the work. He draws the works to be built. The layout allows him to master all the elements built. For this project, as I said before, 7,000 stones were necessary. For the last project, I would like to talk to you about an important notion. This is the embodied energy in construction. This energy corresponds to the sum of the energies necessary for the manufacture of materials and their implementation on the site. Today, we prioritize the energy consumed for comfort, but recent research has shown that embodied energy is more important than maintenance energy. I would like to point out to you a research carried out within the framework to the APTZ in Zurich. It is a great school in Zurich. This study demonstrates, taking as an example for the important operation carried out by Fernand Pouillon in 1960 in Meudon, near Paris, that the embodied energy is more important than all the solutions that we adopt today to make low-cost housing energy consumption. Technical, such as wall insulation, double glazing, and reinforced ceiling joinery, double flow, etc. Fernand Pouillon's construction is in massive stone, coming from the south of France, the Fontvieille quarries near Arles, and transport by train to Paris. You can find this research in internet. It is available in internet. The conclusion that the embodied energy, if we take stock over 60 years, which is a normal lifespan for a building, insulation or double glazing solutions only provide a marginal improvement compared to a balance sheet embeddable carbons from solid stone construction. These studies should make us think about the sophisticated solutions that we recommended for our current building. The debauchery of technology delivered to the disappointments of their expensive maintenance and whose obsolescence is less than the lifespan of buildings. Beyond these technical considerations, we must also understand that we are campaigning for an architecture which proposes to put man back at the center of architectural concerns. The architect must step aside in front of their work, of his work. As stated in the introduction, we need to detach ourselves from the psychic dimensions of our creation, but by allowing those who will live in our buildings to be able to invest psychically in their place of life. Man achieves happiness in his relationship to his place of life, exists without being prevented by architectural form resulting from a psychiatric attitude. This is essential if we want our profession to retain its social role. And I have found in stone construction an ally in achieving this goal. Today, I am continuing my research in a country in West Africa, Senegal, entirely built in natural materials and with techniques, excluding the use of construction machinery. We demonstrate that it is possible to achieve inevitable low carbon objectives. But this will be the subject of another conference, if you don't mind. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Gilles. That was wonderful. So we have about 45 people here, and we have another 50 over in the Teams talk. Just so that people in the Teams room know, we had a problem getting Gilles to join the Teams talk, so we're live casting this Zoom webinar into Teams. If you want to ask questions, come across to the Zoom webinar where you can join and ask questions. I'm not able to monitor questions in the Teams session, so we might throw it open to the floor. I mean, it's I might start, Gilles. There's a question at the heart of the lecture, which is about failure and being able to learn from failure and move forward. And I enjoyed you talking about moments in your career where you were critical of yourself, of the high-tech work, and that you were able to then find a way to navigate from that, and it's not something that is talked about very often in practice, not publicly. And I'm just interested in, was that a painful process, or how was that process for you? How did that happen?
Sorry, it's difficult for me to understand.
Désolé, je ne parle pas très bien français, en fait. Alors, peut-être, if there is somebody in the group here who speaks a little bit of French and maybe can help Gilles communicate, I will unmute you if you just let me know. Because my French is... Désolé Gilles, ma français c'est terrible en fait.
Just like my English.
No, pas du tout.
I understand the global of the question, but I need to have perhaps a better translation to give you an answer of your question. I understand that you have noticed that I transform my approach one time after I've make architecture with high technology or some like high technology, but yes, it was. But at the beginning of my work, I did some construction in earth. Near Lyon, I did construction in earth. It was just at the beginning of my work, and I was always attentive to the problem of the footprint of our work in the climate, and I think that it's an important question for us now, and for me it is a permanent question I have about my work, about my working process, and to be attentive of this question of energy, and but it's not only for about question of energy or to find the best way to build to maintain the climate on Earth, but also to redefine the position of an architect. I think that people, to be happy, need to live in architecture or in place where they can invest themselves. And it's very difficult if the architecture is too, I'm sorry, is too aesthetic. We have to put away the aesthetic. Not to put away, it's not a good way. It's why it's difficult for me to explain in English. It's not to push away the aesthetic, but the aesthetic should be submit to human who are living in architecture. You know, I don't know if it's architecture is not an art like sculpture or painting. It's an art more and more difficult to do, and it's why we have to. It's why I said that it's not very often you find architecture which is at the top of this art. Perhaps we can sometime, but I don't know today architecture which is a lesson for me. Sorry for my English.
No, your English is excellent.
No, thank you.
It's my failure as a European to speak French. I speak better French after a bottle of wine, Gilles.
Yes, I'm sorry, you cannot share such bottle, but I have some of my one here, and after the lecture I will drink in thinking with you.
Do anybody in the audience have questions for Gilles? I can see that certainly in the Zoom webinar we have a lot of students here who I know would find. I mean, I'll be very honest, Gilles, I love the detail. The detail is so simple in the way that you construct. I remember being very confused as a first year about construction details and weathering and all of these things, and there's something quite compelling about the way you build. It's very direct. So would anyone like to ask a question of Gilles? Everybody's shy, Gilles.
It's difficult to make lectures.
It's interesting. I think that there's a question in all of this that you raised at the start, which is so much of what shapes the carbon footprint of a building are regulations. I know that the loading regulation for offices that engineers have to meet just results in huge structural loadings which never arise and which are baked into the design. And it's something that is very difficult to question. It's very difficult to, universities don't really engage in these technical matters. Architecture as a body, as a discipline, doesn't engage with these technical matters so often. We leave these to committees. We tend to get focused on, very important social issues and other things, but it does strike me as very strange that we don't think and critique the regulations and the limits they place on the capacity for us to build in a given place. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Yeah, it's a very important reflection, and it's as a consequence on how we can learn or how we can teach architecture. And for example, when I was professor in the School of Architecture in Montpellier, south of France, and I make real experience with my students to build with stone. And we go to the quarry, and then we are helped by the men who are working these quarries to do a real project in stone with my students. And it's an experience very fundamental, because when students see how stone could be stable, we can make an arch or make a span with stone, massive stone. It's an experience very important, and I think that now architecture become only a discipline of purely aesthetic, and and they are dominated by the engineer, and the engineer are under the I don't know the word, under they are integrated in companies, and it's companies at the end will manage architecture, and in France companies said, okay, architects, imagine what do you want to do? But no, we are able to do that, and nothing. Don't worry about what we are this time. We are able to do the techniques, and it's why at the end architects have lost their function for the maîtrise, I don't know in English, the maîtrise of a work, of art. And if you cannot, it's just like if a sculptor as a great sculptor, he have to know how the matter could react, can react to his hand, in his hand, and it's very important to give a good master of art. You know, it's sorry, it's difficult to explain it. But,
no, it's very clear. I have a few questions coming in. The first one that I'd like to go to is, I'm trying to find out how to do this now, participants, yeah. So the first question I'd like to go to is Michael Herman, who has a question about insulation. Michael, I'm just going to, with your permission, allow you to talk, and you can ask the question directly yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the talk. It was very inspirational. I'm quite involved with a project in a medieval house in France with walls of 1.5 meters thick. One of the issues there is, I'm just wondering if you've had experience of actually needing to insulate stone walls on the inside, especially in any rooms or spaces that need heating quickly, because the actual thermal inertia can be your enemy as well, because it can take a very long time to warm a room like that.
Thank you for the question. I read it on the question on the system. We can integrate insulation in the middle of a stone, but in fact, you have to do 2 walls to make it possible. And in the economy of our system, result of use of massive and unique stone, very thick. We don't need it. We need, if you look to the rules, we need insulation, and in our building we have insulation. But I think that some studies have pointed the problem of using insulation, because using insulation costs a lot of energy to make it, to fabrication of this, and the time, it's a very short time. The insulation doesn't work a long time. It's really a problem. It's why, if you look to the past, how people have used the solution against the freeze or against the cold of the world. They use sometimes they use panels of wood, and wood is very interesting because you don't lose the great inertia of the stone, and it provide comfort because they cut the infrared emission of your body, and it's why it's comfortable. And why, if our ancestors have lived in such house. We can live in the future in such house. You are a heat machine, and if you preserve you with some coats on you, maintain the comfort.
That makes sense, yeah. I mean, it is a curiosity about insulation, just how high energy the standard products are in terms of their carbon quotient. I think there'll be a different challenge, Michael, for UK and Ireland, which we'll have to innovate for ourselves. Tobias, you have a question. I know that you're under the name Luke. Tobias, with your permission, I'm going to unmute Luke's.
The question. Could you please explain how the services are integrated into the solid stone blocks?
Yeah.
It's very easy. You cannot put the services in the stone. You know, if we have, it's sorry, but it's this position of, or this disposition of integration of the services in the walls result only because we are using concrete. Donc it's very easy to make in concrete wire or something like that, but it doesn't matter if you see the wire on the wall. We have integrated sometimes this the services in the wall. It's very easy. Imagine you are in an old building and you have to need to make it. It's exactly the same. You can dig. I don't know if it's dig, but you can make can sew the wall on a very thin centimeters, and we can put the wire on it, and it's very, very simple.
Merci, Gilles. Jennifer has a question in the chat about the project in Senegal. Jennifer, I'm going to unmute you.
Sorry. About Senegal, what's...
Jennifer, can you...
Yes.
Hi. Hi. It's very you know, different in Senegal, like the rules and regulations with building compared to the West. So it was quite interesting to hear you say that, you know, you started a project there. What made you want to go to Senegal, and how have you experienced the building process compared to the West?
Okay, yes, in Senegal, the average temperature is around 25 degrees. I don't know in Fahrenheit, sorry, it's just 25 degrees Celsius. And it's why we don't need any, for example, insulation, no rules about insulation. But the rules for building is always the same in the earth, because we have to transport the loads of the roof to the ground, and it's the same. I don't know if I answer to your question. Is it only about regulation, insulation rules, or also about the rules in general?
The rules in general, as in the logistics, like did you have to submit your designs before building?
In all of my life of architecture, architecture is a great, you have to, a great strategy. You have to go, not directly, but yes, you have you need permission to build, but it's very, very soft, and you can make, when I began the I made two buildings in the Senegal, which is one is for artists in Saint-Louis, the Senegal, which is on the north of Senegal. This is built with earth block, and then another one in the south of Senegal, which is made of rammed earth. But when I began this second house, I was no really plan, only finished design. I have an idea where I want to go, but not yes. But the authority are very open to that. It's why I am in Senegal. It's
okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Ollie, you have a question. Ollie Chapman.
Yes, I read it. In addition to the environmental rationale behind using mass stone in your construction, the historic value of the material and the whole Berkeley society, I hope I am correct in understanding that you also refer to the something spiritual and morally just in the use of stone. Can you expand upon these ideas of moral human values that are embodied in your use of stone, whether as an act of construction or as an act of inhabitation? I don't know the difference between construction. Yes, okay, I understand. But it's the role of an architect to make people happy. No, I think it's a role, and but to reach this objective, you need to how to build, how I can build, how I can use materials, and but at the end, our role is to make people happy in their house, in his country, in his place where he lives. He have to be happy, and so it's my role. And the use of stone for me first is for environmental qualities, but also that they limit my own imagination of my own psychic mind, and I think that architecture you have to forget or to eliminate of your work this attitude. But if you look, the situation of this group, French group, which is Loulipo, and they invent constraints to eliminate this dimension psychic of their work, and they are great writers. In France, we use this kind of technique, and all of the poem we have a strict rules, and it's very interesting because you have to search why you can express your mind in this such constraint. I don't know if I have an answer to your question.
Ali, do you have any?
Thanks. Yeah, I think, and thank you very much for the lecture. It was really wonderful. I think you've kind of answered it. I suppose I'm kind of intrigued because in my experience of visiting buildings that are built out of stone, with very few kind of exceptions, they tend to be these kind of religious, kind of spiritual buildings. So I wonder if there's something kind of, if it's a personal thing for me that connects those the material and the spirit, the kind of silence of a space that might exist. But that might just be due to kind of location. But I think it's really lovely to hear you talk about the emotive qualities of a material and the role of an architect within that. As I guess that dialogue is missing from most modes of construction I can think of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ollie. So what we might do, I think everybody is going to phone their local quarry, Gilles, and find out how much it costs to cut a 2-meter slab of stone in our country to see how it would work. But merci beaucoup pour cette belle conférence. It was incredible. I really enjoyed it. And I think everybody else did too. So to everybody here on Zoom and to the people still, I'm just checking, yes, we still have people over in the Teams room. Thank you so much. And to Gilles in particular, that was wonderful.
Thank you for your invitation. I am very happy to speak about my work, even if my English is not so good.
No, it's great. It's lovely to meet. You have a punk spirit, Gilles, in your attitude to accepted wisdom, and it's very enjoyable to hear. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah, bonne nuit.
And see you soon.
Yes, we'll speak soon, Gilles. Thank you. Bye.